Welcome back to That Dad Guy. It is December the 30th, 2024, and today I want to continue with my father's stamp collection by showing you another country. Now, last episode we tackled this binder, the Americas, not Canada and the US, that's what it says on the side, and we went through several countries that he had. He's got them all in alphabetical order in here, and so I want to continue with that. But one of the comments that I had, or actually several comments that I had, were that people didn't know as much information about this area of the world, and that when it comes to philately, there isn't as big of collectors of this area. And so I want to change that. I want to show how beautiful the stamps from the Americas are, and that means we've talked about Canada. I don't know if I've shown the US collection my father has on it, so that'll be in the future. But all the other countries, from Mexico all the way down, there are so many beautiful stamps that have come in there and a lot of rich history. And so I want to touch on that history a bit going forward. So in the past, I've said this is the albums that my father has. We lay them out in front. We flip through the pages, you and I, and we see what stamps that he has managed to collect in his lifetime. And in the past, I thought, that's pretty good. I'm sharing the collection and people are getting a chance to see some of the stamps from those countries. But I want to do more. I want to educate a little bit more myself into what I'm looking at and why we're doing this, and why maybe the stamps look the way that they do. So we're going to start that by continuing with the same album, but we're going to focus on one country. The next country that I got to alphabetically, and we might go back and do the other ones again in more detail if you guys like this new format. We've got endless amounts of videos to make, so why couldn't we touch back on some of the other countries again? Maybe I'll have more stamps from those countries too to show you. So we're going to give a little history behind each of the countries that we show. And I'm going to learn something, and maybe you'll learn something too. Or maybe you'll leave in the comments some other things that will educate me further on the country based on the knowledge you already have of that area. If that sounds fun, let's go ahead and do that. Make sure you like, you subscribe, you leave positive comments, you share with other people, and you put the notification bell on. So what we're going to start with is we're going to say the country we're dealing with. I'm going to give you a little bit of a historical background on that country. Maybe put up the flag, maybe show you where in the world it's located, as some people may not know where some of these countries are. So we'll show you that, and then we're going to look at the stamps. Sound good? All right, let's get to it. So today's country that we're going to focus on is Brazil. That was the next one in the catalog of stamps my father had put together. And so Brazil is a country of 200 million people. It is in South America. It is a former Portuguese colony. So there have been inhabitants there for 30,000 years. Lots of tribes, rich history of progressive people that have lived there. The Europeans that arrived were Portuguese. They arrived in 1500. They were looking for India, like many other explorers around them that have discovered the Americas in all sorts of different places, but they found Brazil instead. And they found it was rich in resources, especially in wood. So Brazil wood, where the name of the country comes from now, or where it's turned into, comes from the rich wood that they had. And in the start, the Portuguese worked with the local inhabitants to create trade, to harvest that wood. And as they went down the coast and deforest the area, they decided they needed to go further inland, and they started to create plantations, but they needed people to work on those plantations. So in about 1543, the Portuguese plantation owners enslaved local inhabitants to work on it. And when that wasn't good enough, they started to go to their colonies in Africa and bring over slaves from there. Now, the great slave trade that have come to North America, we hear a lot of it in both the United States and Canada, the slaves that have come into those areas. And Brazil had 40% of all slave population. That's 8 times more than went to the United States, came to Brazil to work on those plantations. And it was a big part of their empire. Brazil was the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery too. So it has that history too. Right up until 1800s, Brazil was kind of run the same way as a colony. But when Napoleon came to power in France and the royals were overthrown, the Portuguese royals got nervous too, and so they fled from Portugal and they went to Brazil. And when they got to Brazil, they decided they wanted to have more infrastructure, put more money into it, started to build it up, and kind of create its own entity, starting to give it a little bit more independence. By the 1820s, the head of the royal families went back to Portugal, but they left their son in charge, and he became the emperor of the new Brazil Empire that was left behind. And that went in about 1822. There were some internal skirmishes in 1823, but it worked that way as an empire right up until 1889. In 1889, it became the Republic of Brazil. And then for a while, that worked in its capacity up until about the 1930s. And then they got a dictator in from the 1930s until 1945, kind of coinciding with what was happening a little bit and in Europe at the time too. And then by the 1960s, after the dictator had fallen and there's some other things going on, kind of went into a military rule, and that happened right up until in 1985. In 1985, it became a democratic country, and from there it has grown. It's got a constitution and grows into the massive power that it is now. It's a G20 country and very rich in culture, history, all sorts of things. And then we're going to see it through postage stamps. Through the postage stamps my father's collected anyways. So let's have a look. The earliest postage stamps my father has from Brazil are Scott number 65 and 66. You can see they have heavy cancellation marks over there, but you can still see them in underneath. And there's a big jump all the way to 161. And so as we're looking at some of the people that are on these stamps, we will find out that they are rulers, they were dictators, or they were instrumental people in the history of Brazil. When you look at South America, Brazil touches almost every other country in South America, which were all basically Spanish colonies. Even these early stamps from 1927, they have some uniqueness about them. When you look at those compared to other stamps of the world around the same time period, there's something very distinctive about what is coming out of this country versus some of the other stamps you'll see, whether they're in Canada or US in the same time frame. They're still using plates and doing all that. And there are still sets of stamps. Here in the 1930s, this is when they have the dictatorship is going in, so the variety of stamps doesn't seem to be as great. I do like these really big ones here. Something you don't necessarily see with a lot of other countries this early. They've changed it up a bit. During the Second World War. And although the war is happening on European grounds, it does affect the rest of the world. Certainly the economies thereafter. South American governments have had to find their own way of doing things to keep their countries afloat and commerce with their neighbors, with European countries, with Asian countries. You'll see in my father's collection, he puts all his used stamps in Scott catalog order, and then he uses Vario pages at the end to put any mint stamps that he's collected. So we will see those too. And because airmail stamps are in a different category of Scott numbers, he does separate the airmail stamps, so they're not in year or order the rest of his stamps, but in a second section he'll have here near the end. for those of you that love collecting airmail. A nice large stamp, 1968. Fucking page, there we go. Brazil is one of those countries I would love to see one day, along with many other countries in South America. Get a chance to go to Rio. I can say when I thought of Brazil in the past, I think of soccer or football, them having one of the great nations for it. Pelé, of course. You think of Carnival, another big, beautiful stamp. You might think of Brazil nuts or Brazilian wood. Here we can see how he's gone into Vario pages. There's a couple airmails. Some postal tax. Whenever I do these videos and I go through my father's collection, it makes me want to go to the stamp shows and grab all the stamps that I can find from those nations to try to fill in the gaps. To see what other stamps are missing, what's not in this collection. See, some of the stamps are moving around a little bit. Some interesting stamps too. And so there is the end of his Brazilian collection. I hope you like this new format of a smattering of history and geography to let you know a little bit more about the country we're looking at the stamps from. Now, I didn't get into all the names of the different explorers, the different leaders of the countries, the royal families that have come and gone. If you want to go into more in depth on it, there are some great videos that are out there. There's some great history books that you can Google all sorts of that. I just wanted to give you an overview of the country, where it's located, how it got to be where it is, why it has Portuguese as a language when most of the other countries have Spanish as its language. And hopefully I did that. Well, we'll see what country we look at next when we continue the series. But for now, you guys have a magical week. What, Polo? You say like, subscribe, share, and tell all your friends?
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?
Bye. Should I keep this on my desk all year round and keep changing the date, or is it specific to December? If you've watched this much, you can let me know.